You probably wondered, can I mingle with Elvish as quickly as possible? Given the new content going on with the Rings of Power series, you probably want to become more of a fan by affirming your literacy in Elvish. That is some good resolution, and I'm here to save you time to literacy by unveiling the letters of the most well-known script that you probably are familiar with from the movies, or from fan arts. I'm not talking about the writing in The One Ring, because it is in what is called Black Speech, which is the language of Mordor. Wouldn't you prefer to be one of the good immortal elves instead? Why elves when we have Voynich, you might ask? This is because I think that getting in the mindset of language and script creators will help us in the main objective of this channel. I'll make sure you get more value than expected if you stick with me until the end. You came to learn one thing, to see if such a thing as learning it is possible, for some of you. But you'll end up learning more than that in just a few minutes, so please be patient. If you stay until the end, you'll have no reason to be illiterate in Elvish. What you probably want to learn by now is called the Tengwar, which is the plural of Tengwa, which means letter. If it is not your first time getting familiar with content like this, you probably have already heard of modes in relation to the Tengwar, or letters, and that these modes influence how you read. And maybe you already know some few keywords related to the subject. This is but a start in your journey to literacy, so I won't get too technical. I want to get to the meat of the subject as soon as possible, so let's brief end this introduction. At the end of this video, if you do your homework, you might remember 24 Tengwar. We will cover the next few in another video. And if this video gets 200 views and 50 likes, I might publish a cheat sheet and provide a link to it in the next video where we will cover the remainder of the Tengwar writing system. The Tengwar, most known as the Elvish alphabet, is what is called a featural script, or featural writing system. In featural scripts, every character leads to the next in a logical, almost scientific way, and you can learn to relearn the script on the fly by remembering how to add features to the most basic symbols of the script. So, in the displayed order, you can see on the screen the letters Tinko, Parma, Ando, Yumbar. Tinko is pronounced as te and means metal. Parma is pronounced as pe and means book. Ando is pronounced as ende and means gate. Finally, Yumbar is pronounced as mbe and means fate. Just take a closer look at how these symbols relate to one another and enjoy the features of each. We go from Tinko to Parma by adding a closing line to the bottom of the open curve of Tinko. We go from Tinko to Ando by adding an extra open curve, and from Ando to Yumbar by closing both open curves of Ando. We can also get to Yumbar through Parma by adding a closed curve to it. Now onto the features that appear in this collection of Tengwar. Please note that if you understand well how these Tengwar happen to be built, learning the others won't be painful at all. So, the basic Tengwar here is Tinko. Its sound comes from contact between the tongue and the back of the teeth. This is what is called an alveolar stop. If you move to Parma by closing the open curve, you get to bilabial stop territory. If you add an open curve to Tinko, thus turning it into Ando, you are adding prior to the already present alveolar stop, the most natural nasal component, which is alveolar nasal, in. If you add a closed curve to Parma, thus turning it into Yumbar, you are adding prior to the already present bilabial stop, the most natural nasal component, which is bilabial nasal, m. Now when you move the vertical stroke up and keep the shapes of the curves and closing strokes as is, you get Sule, which means spirit, Forman, which means north, Anto, which means mouth, and finally, Ampa, which means hook. Now, you might first want to notice that the symbols with two curved shapes, namely Anto and Ampa, still have a nasal component to them, and they modify the open and closed single curve sound according to the most natural way this could happen. And, instead of a stop, for the basic sound, we are dealing with a fricative, which is just another way of saying that the sound is made through friction and can be extended in time. Again, the basic symbol with vertical stroke pointing to the top, named Sule, is an alveolar fricative, s. You can see how moving from nasal, into, s, doesn't create a, anse, sound but rather, a softer way to pronounce it is, anta, so you want to remember this for later. In the same fashion, adding nasal, into, f, doesn't create a, anfe, sound but rather, a softer, anpe. Instead of having two sounds that can extend in time, a nasal and a fricative, You just use the nasal and replace the fricative with the corresponding stop sound. Now on to the next group. Make the open side of the curve be at the top and place the vertical stroke to the right of the curve. You get into the velar fricative sound,
Hierma.
which means treasure. If you constrict your lips into an oo sound while sounding,
Hie.
you get
Hiue.
sound named,
Hiuesta.
which means breeze. If you preceded the velar fricative
Hie.
by a nasal alveolar in, you naturally add an open stroke at the left and name it,
Anga.
which means jaws. If you constrict your lips again and close both curves at their top, you get the sounding unque, which means a hollow. Let's move on. We need to make the next group by writing the open curves as the preceding one, and lowering the vertical stroke still, to the right of the curve. You get into the velar stop sound calma, which means lamp. If you constrict your lips again into an oo sound while sounding ka, you get qua sound named quesse, which means feather. If you preceded the velar stop k by a nasal alveolar in, you naturally add an open curve at the left and name it anga, which means iron. The sound ne transforms the stop ki into another stop ingo. If you constrict your lips again and close both curves at their top, you get the sounding ungue, which means spider's web. One way to get used to vowel markings, which we won't cover in this video, is to take a look at the names of the letters and study how they are written. Depending on the mode you are using, the vowel markings can change. Sometimes the vowel between two consonants comes on top of the first consonant, like in Quenya mode, and sometimes it comes on top of the second consonant, like in Sindarin mode or black speech mode. By far, Quenya mode is the most logical, but noteworthy for you to know is that there is also a mode that represents English using Tengwar, and you might want to look into known texts to get used to reading the Tengwar before you get into full-fledged Elvish words. But for now, as a starting point, the vocabulary list related to the names of the letters can be a good exercise of memory to start your journey with Elvish. So far, we have dealt with 4 groups of 4 Tengwar each, and we're about to get into 2 groups that are related to these and which are related between them. There is a natural way to move into those 2 groups. You just take the first and third group, or the second and fourth, and make the vertical stroke be as high as the open curve, thus making shapes that resemble a stylized N or M. Give or take specificities of the Tengwar writing system. So, by using either the first or second group, we get the characters on screen to the left, and you can add the characters on screen to the right through modifying shapes of symbols from the third or fourth group. In the first set, we get the letters, with the same logical sequence as follows. Ori can be read as reg, which means heart. Vala can be read as veg, which means angelic power. Newman can be read as neg, which means west, and finally Malta can be read as mag, which means gold. In the second set, we get the following Tengwar. Anna can be read as yeg, which means gift. Vilya can be read as veg, which means sky. Noldo can be read as neg, which means deep elf and is the name of a group of elves called Noldorin. And finally, Nuami can be read as enwe, which means torment. So far, if you do your homework, you might have remembered 24 Tengwar. We will cover the next few in another video, and if this video gets enough views, I might publish a cheat sheet and provide a link for it in the next video where we will cover the remainder of the Tengwar writing system.